This is Call the Psychiatrist, the show where psychiatrists answer your questions. I'm Dr. David Handley.
And I'm Dr. Abby Snavely.
In this episode, we're going to try to answer 3 listener questions. We have a question about humor in therapy, a question about trusting the process, and one about emotional growth.
Say you like me, you better count the ways.
So this is a potpourri episode. There's really nothing that's going to connect these questions.
Sometimes the red thread, if you will, presents itself. So I'm not, we may not know it now, but I bet we might know it at the end of the session.
Okay, well, we'll just call it a potpourri. If it were a Jeopardy category, we'll call it a potpourri.
Fair enough.
It's a melange.
What is the unconscious?
I hope we do an episode one day on drugs so we can call it potent potables, but
well, one day. I love how the marketing comes before the content.
The marketing always leads, right? The cover art is where I start.
With you, I know.
Did you know, I don't speak French, but did you know potpourri literally means putrid pot?
I did not.
Or, yeah, like a rotting pot.
Like a rotting pot.
Mm-hmm. Which, growing up, every house I was in, there was one of those bowls of potpourri somewhere in the house.
That's what I was thinking too, like an old babysitter, and it actually did stink.
Oh, it smells terrible. I mean, all that cologne and fragrance, and my nose would just stop up. And yeah.
Well, this lady told us that if we touched it, that there was acid on it that would eat our skin. This was this after-school babysitter I had. And me being both skeptical and having impulse control problems, I put my hand in it. I still got my skin. Nothing happened. It was just putrid water, but it wasn't right.
Well, should we get started?
We can get started. Sorry.
Okay.
We're just having fun, Dave.
All right. Our first question comes from Becca.
Thank you for answering my question. You two seem capable and thoughtful. My therapist keeps telling me, quote, trust the process. I have no idea what that means. What is the difference between the therapy process and the therapy relationship? Can one exist without the other? What do you think, Dave? What do you got?
So I have never, nor would I ever use that phrase. How about you?
Only if I was mocking myself, right? I mean, there's like a few things, like it's a very Goodwill Hunting, like it's not your fault, or trust the process. I'll think of some other ones. It's like a cartooned.
You have to sit with it. Let's sit with this. Yeah.
Cartooned, caricatured kind of quote. So.
Yeah, I think I know, if I'm being very generous, I know what is intended, but to me, it sounds so dismissive and probably patronizing, because I have to think.
And cryptic. I mean, if Becca is saying this therapist has said it over and over and she still doesn't understand what it means, then it's confusing. And then the therapist is also not in tune to the fact that this is an inadequate explanation.
Yeah. Well, I kept thinking about what are all the questions that must be coming up for Becca that would then elicit that response. I mean, she's got concerns. Right. It's like, am I being the right kind of patient? How long does this take? This is new. It's a lot of uncertainty. How many more sessions? I want to feel better. I mean, everybody wants to feel better. And so there's probably so many questions that are valid and worth answering, or at least giving your best guess at how to answer it. And to just say, trust the process. If I were in Becca's place, I would actually be very irritated.
Oh, I'd lose my mind. But and the therapist would hear about it from me, but Becca might be a nicer person than me.
Well, that's probably,
just on a statistical level. But anyway, continue.
I guess maybe to define it for Becca, I mean, I can suppose something, which is that, yes, therapy is an experience, and many therapeutic approaches rely on the relationship you have with your therapist. And that does take some time to unfold. And so the unfolding of that experience is the process, but you can also observe the process and talk about it. You don't have to trust it. I don't even know what that means.
Usually that actually, I mean, again, I come from a psychodynamic background, but that is the therapy, is talking about the process, observing the process, working on it together, understanding not just the patient, but how they relate to people, including the therapist. So yeah, like what exactly are you trusting here? Because I would want to trust that I'm going to get some freaking answers.
Well, also, if it's early in the relationship, like if I've just met somebody, why would you trust me? Like, what have I done to earn your trust? What am I? I'm
Right.
insisting on something that I may not deserve.
Well, indeed. I think that's where we're coming from. So yeah, so I mean, so do we want to try to define these things? I mean, I want to answer Becca's question, but what do you think the process is?
Oh, I've given it my best shot. I mean, I
Oh,
really think
okay.
it's
That was
that.
it.
I really think that.
Sorry.
No, I mean, like it's just
Yeah,
the evolving relationship,
it's
and
just
then
happening.
yeah,
I
it's
mean, I
it is.
guess it's if you're doing CBT, it's homework and monitoring your thoughts and whatever. I don't know.
Well,
But I don't.
no, that's, the reason I don't have more of an answer is because there's so many questions that probably that became the answer for.
Fair
So the
enough.
answer is like, what's the process? Like, well, what was your question? Is it
Right.
why am I not feeling better, or is it,
What
you
are we
know,
doing here?
yeah, what are we doing here? Why am I still so anxious? How can things actually be different?
When are you
I
going to
feel,
start being helpful?
yeah. But right, because I think probably at the root of a lot of it is a sense of impatience. I mean, I
Sure.
guess if that's the answer you keep
Frustration.
getting. Hmm.
Right.
Which is
Hmm.
all normal and worthy of talking about, not being
Indeed.
dismissed.
Right.
And here's an anecdote, which is kind of related. It's not about therapy, but so I took rowing lessons a couple of years ago. This is whitewater rafting.
All right.
And so I'm on the water. I don't actually know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing was intuitive. And I actually needed theory. I needed some intellectual strategies. And all I got was, let's have an experience, man. And so, and I am well past middle age. I know what kind of learner I am. I know what kind of person I am. And I'm not the kind of person who wants to capsize in a river for the experience of it. Like that
And
was
your
just so
experience was
frustrating.
anxiety and confusion.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like,
Right.
no, I am experiencing this and this is not what I signed up for.
Right. I want to know how to survive this next part. I don't want to just survive it. I want to have some strategies to survive it. And
I
so
get
telling me
that.
to trust the experience or trust the process, like that was not doing it for me. And and maybe there's something I could learn from that. Like maybe I do need to be more in the moment. Maybe I need to not think I can predict the future. But that's a better discussion in therapy than just being dismissed as let it ride.
And if you're any kind of whatever, therapist, coach, teacher, something, I think there's a lot to be said for meeting the learner where they're at.
Exactly.
So yeah. So can the therapy process exist without the therapy relationship? I don't think so.
No.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I can't even, I was trying to think of even different disciplines, different approaches. No, I think you still have to have the relationship regardless. So,
right.
all right. Does that do it for
Well,
Becca?
Becca, I hope that does it for you. I hope you feel like you can get more answers, ask the therapist what they need. Feel free to write back if there's more specifics you want to provide, but it's not good enough. And I think you are right to notice that. Not
Yeah.
good enough yet.
It's not good enough. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Cha 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 cha.
All right. Our next question comes from Jessica. Your show has been fun and often moving to listen to, and I'm interested in learning more. Can you both talk about the role of humor in therapy? My therapist and I have decent rapport, and we tackle the issues that brought me to therapy some trauma, anxiety, and self esteem. Occasionally, though, we have good bouts of laughter. It really lightens the mood. In particular, I'm thinking of some glitches online. Once her young daughter burst into the office after what appeared to be bath time. Another time, I sent a text to my therapist that was meant for my wife. She was gracious, thankfully, and it's become kind of an inside joke. I know therapy is supposed to be serious, but these are the moments I hang on to. I wonder how these things feel from your side of the relationship. Do you have inside jokes with your clients? What role do they play in therapy? What do you think, Abby?
Well, I love this question is what I think. And I think right when we got it, that was what I said. I mean, to the end, is there a role for humor in therapy? Do we have inside jokes? I don't know about you. I would say absolutely. I think that humor has been an issue in therapy since the days of Freud. He wrote about it, had a lot to say about it. And there continues to be clinical papers and studies about it. But just like very practically speaking, I think that humor is a way of relating. And on a very basic level, I want to know all parts of my patients, their good parts, in addition to the things that they struggle with. And so, as Jessica's pointing out, I think, a joke, a shared moment, something like that, that becomes kind of a currency or a shorthand between a patient and I tends to make us closer.
Yeah, I was thinking, I love this too because it just tells me that Jessica has a great relationship with her therapist.
Right.
And I
Right.
think, humor is important in life. It's important, I would say, in all relationships. So, of course, it's important in a therapeutic relationship.
Right. I mean, I think there's a lot of different functions. I think I talked about closeness. I think there's also, again, just moments of levity are important.
Yeah, life is
Right?
absurd. And
Oh,
I think
indeed.
sometimes you have to laugh about the absurdity as a way to cope with things. I mean, I think one thing therapy does is about having perspective.
Yeah.
And humor is a
Good
great
point.
way to maintain perspective.
Yeah. I also think that humor can be a way to express things that you don't want to say directly. I mean, this is outside of therapy, but if I say, "Oh my God, I'm going to kill Dave," I'm not really going to kill Dave, but that's like a funnier way. I mean, right? You live too far away, but
Right.
like it's not like a great joke, but like it's a funny way to, and a shorthand of saying I'm really irritated and maybe I do have some aggressive impulse on him, but this humor allows me to exaggerate it and joke about it, and then I don't have to do it.
So I mostly think of humor as being adaptive, as being a very mature defense mechanism.
Right.
Obviously, there's times in therapy when a person may use humor to distance themselves, from something
Sure.
painful, a memory, a negative emotion. And so, I mean, and I'm sure you pay attention to how somebody might deflect a question with humor or they use it to change a subject. But, I'm not a wet blanket. I'm going to laugh with them and then
Sure.
come back and make the observation and see if there's something there that we should talk more about, or if it's too painful right now. We need to revisit it. But I think maybe to Jessica's question, it's supposed to be serious. It's like, well, not
Eh.
necessarily unless it's getting in the way of something. But even then you can talk about how those are things that need to be revisited.
And like you said, it's a mature defense mechanism or higher level defense mechanism, but it's still a defense.
Right.
And we are defended, we should be, but if since I view my role as often as analyzing the defense or seeing what is getting in the way of someone being open and honest, then of course we're going to take a look at it too. But obviously we don't want to be humorless. I hope, obviously.
And then I think timing is important. I mean, if I'm getting to know
Absolutely.
somebody, I don't know their sensibilities yet, and so I'm not necessarily going to start making a joke because that could be read in a way I wouldn't intend, like being flippant or
Right.
lacking in empathy. And I know that sarcasm theoretically maybe is a less helpful strategy in terms of humor. But because that's my sensibility, if I have a patient that is also really sarcastic, then those are the people I have a lot of inside jokes with. I think, and
Absolutely.
I think that stuff is some of the best parts of the relationships in my mind.
I think that you're right. If someone is very sarcastic, I'm sarcastic, that's a great way to have an inside joke. And like you said, like any relationship, we're going to move in and out of it. It's not that the entire currency of the relationship becomes jokes. But I also think that there's a way that I want to be careful. I don't want to hurt someone with a joke. I want to be very careful about teasing, even though for some people, having a lighthearted way of approaching something is maybe easier than confronting them dead on. But I think also sometimes patients will come in and tease me. And it can be a fine line between affection and maybe something a little bit darker. If someone comes in and makes fun of my messy office, there's a lot of interpretations about that. It might just be recognizing my humanity. It might be a criticism. It might be an expression of distrust or something else. And so, again, maybe you said you don't want to be a wet blanket. I probably am sometimes, but I kind of treat it like dreams. It's like it can be a way to express something in fewer words, not directly, that could have a lot of meaning.
Oh yeah, and I don't mean to say I won't analyze it or observe it. It's just that in the
Mhm.
moment, if it's actually funny, I'm going to laugh. Like
I
I'm not
love to
going to.
laugh. I love to laugh. And I think you're right. Like something that's truly hilarious, making somebody laugh is, one of the few real spontaneous emotions that people can have. And if you're laughing together, I think that that does feel really good and really genuine. But like being surprised is also good, right? I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes that's what's funny. Put something strange on your head in front of a baby and they're going to lose their minds because they didn't expect it. It's great.
That's right. that's your material.
That's my material. Give me a baby. Give me a baby. I'll make them laugh.
As long as that's your audience, you're a king.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and then my kid grew up and he's like, Mommy, did you know it's not funny to just say something that's not true? And I was like, you're right. I mean, the sarcasm point is probably correct.
How could he be your child, though?
He's related to his father. They're a real drag. Anyway.
All right. Do we have anything else on this one, Jessica?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Cha 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 cha.
All right. And our last question comes from Shauna.
I've been listening to your show and heard your talk about regression and being a parent-like figure to your clients. I have a follow-up question. When I was growing up, I was always so much more sensitive than my siblings. I seemed to feel the world more deeply than they did or my parents did. I cried more than I should have. It drove everyone in my house crazy. My dad, who was a police officer, would tell me to stop being so sensitive. My brother was worse. Stop being such a baby. What I learned is that in order to fit in, I had to be someone else. I had to shut off a part of me. Today, I don't cry at all, not even at funerals or genuinely sad events. I still feel sad, but I do not express it easily. Is this what you address through what you called reparenting? I like the idea of my therapist being the best mom I ever had. How do you work with someone in therapy so that they can stop pretending to be someone they are not and stand up for who they really are?
So there's two big questions here. And I think you'll need to revisit a comment you made, Abby, in episode 12 about reparenting. But before we get to that, there's this question about being emotionally stunted. And maybe in the explanation of that, that'll help us create a frame for that reparenting comment that you made. I was struggling with coming up with some concise advice without knowing a lot more information. But here's what I noticed. So Shauna is aware of this problem and she wants to address the problem. She's aware of it having possibly a psychological origin, the way emotions were treated when she was a kid, feeling invalidated. There was shame around having certain emotions. She's aware of a genetic component, that she was different from her siblings. Her programming from when she was born may just be different. This is just who she is. So she has this tremendous amount of understanding. And so I was thinking, okay, well, let's say Shauna was in therapy. She's already through a big first step, having this insight. And I thought, okay, well, so when someone is there, really the next thing is, how do you now do something with all that knowledge? How do you put it into action? And so I think my best advice would be that she has to be in some relationships with people where she's trying to be more vulnerable, to be noticing her feelings and what happens when overwhelming feelings come up. Because I have this theory. She didn't say anything about this, but when somebody is aware of one emotion clogging up the line, they're usually more emotionally stunted across the board. And so what I mean is, like, if sadness is unacceptable, my guess is that things like joy, excitement, and maybe especially anger are also not acceptable. And it may not be that the person experiences sadness or anything, but it may just be there's a chronic indifference, this feeling of detachment from people or from experiences. Would you say that that's a possibility or something like that might be going on?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I sometimes will talk with my patients about this kind of thing as kind of maintaining a neutral state, or that if the goal is to be in the middle, to feel nothing, then they've won at the game. But as you're saying it, if there's no risk, there's no reward. So when the door is closed to anger, sadness, frustration, then the door is also closed, like you said, to happiness, joy, maybe even some empathy. And that could have been adaptive for Shauna, right? And she's talking about being very sensitive and that not really being tolerated. I think for a very good reason, she's narrowed her range of emotions that she can safely feel, right? But the problem is that my hunch is the problem is that she developed this coping skill in her household growing up, and then she's carried the coping skill into the present where it doesn't really apply, or she's just more aware of the cost of approaching the world this way.
Right. The cost is she's not, but she may have forgotten or may not even know what the other rewards are, like the other side of like more positive emotional experiences.
Right. This is just her MO, right? Like, it's I would say it's her unconscious, but that, this is just her go-to and it happens without even thinking about it.
Yeah. And by the
But
way,
she's just not
we don't
open.
know this
Yeah.
at all. The reason
No, no, no. Of course not.
I'm speculating this because this happens so frequently. Um,
Oh, yeah. You're
and
not
and
alone,
often,
Shauna.
yeah, and it's not conscious. I mean, often it's in the process of therapy that you start realizing that the person has attenuated their emotional response, as you said,
Yeah.
because that's how they survived.
I think it is. There's this quote. I do not know who to attribute it to, and I'll butcher it anyway, so they're lucky. But something like that the purpose of therapy can be to turn ghosts into ancestors. So if she's still feeling haunted by these memories of her dad and her brother and how she was treated, then the goal would be not to erase those and not take them away, but just have them be part of her past, recognize how they influence things, but that she doesn't have to be continually haunted by them. I don't know. I don't know if that's helpful, but I think it's, probably told well. I think it's a beautiful quote.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think but brings up that idea of reparenting.
Well, let's before we get there.
Yeah, before we go there, go ahead.
Yeah, what if we segue then into how might she manage this?
Yeah.
So if Shauna were in therapy, then that
Mhm.
relationship becomes a sandbox, this proxy relationship where she could try some of this stuff out, where she could be vulnerable, she could notice the feelings of grief around what she's been describing here, and then hopefully have enough of an attachment to the therapist and she feels safe enough that she can start expressing those things openly, see what that's like, see if it's as devastating as she fears they might be, see if she'll be shamed the way she used to be shamed. And of course, that becomes
Mhm.
corrective. It's like, oh, here's a relationship where I wasn't shamed for feeling this way. And I can take the experience of
Yeah.
therapy out into the world, have relationships where I have full emotional depth, or I can express sadness and have healthy relationships. In a really large summary, that's part of the way therapy works. I guess, though, if she weren't in therapy or not interested in that, it's not to say that you have to be in therapy to work on these things.
No, I think that's right. And some of it is about making choices, right? So maybe keeping your emotions in check is very appropriate in the workplace or in casual relationships or something like that. But to be able to make the choice or consider the choice to be more vulnerable in these relationships. So we don't know. We have no idea what Shauna's social life or interactions are like. But I might suggest seeing, are there people in your life that you want to take a risk with? And it could be a little calculated, which maybe doesn't feel great because I know she's trying to get back to feeling more natural and more like her true self. But again, I think it's going to take deliberate attention and action to do something different, that it's not going to come naturally at first to take these risks.
Yeah, I like that word. I think that word is best. It's deliberate. It's
Mhm.
not going to happen. Your tendency will always be your tendency without a lot of effort, a lot of conscious effort.
And just a
Um,
lot of reps, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah.
you've been doing it this way since you were a kid, you got to change the habit.
And it can feel contrived. I think it's what you were saying, or
Yeah, yeah,
inauthentic.
yeah, yeah.
But at the
Yep.
same time, it feels contrived until it doesn't, until
Hmm.
you've experienced it a different way, until it becomes less effortful. Then that's how the reprogramming works.
And I think, with, you have to evaluate your friendships, but it may be worth even telling your friends that this is what you're working on, right? That you enjoy their friendship and you'd like to get closer. You have a tendency to be closed off. And so this is something you're working on. And if there are people that you trust enough in your life, they might be able to help you with this. Therapist friends, maybe other family members. I don't know.
Let's take some of this information and now revisit those comments you were making about reparenting as the therapy process. And let's maybe clarify what you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know the episode number, but I was talking about my analyst or my therapist being the best parent I ever had, which could be true, but it's still he's not a parent, and it's still kind of a pseudo substitute. I'm not going to say a crappy substitute because it was a real gift, but a gift I paid for to give myself also, right? With somebody's help. Like so maybe that's that ghost into ancestors saying, I'm not really sure. And I think, reparenting is a tough one. I think it's some people have advocated for it as a therapy, though I think it's rightfully deemed controversial and pretty dangerous. But I think it's a common fantasy that people have, that they will go in and someone will meet all the needs of the mother, the parent that they wished for, maybe even that they deserved. And, sometimes people are regressed and they are feeling very vulnerable, maybe even childlike in the presence of their therapist. And so, Dave, like you were saying, I think it's important and can be a corrective emotional experience for the therapist to not shame the patient, to react differently, and for the patient to experience that someone in a parental role can be different. But, this is also different because there's going to be boundaries, right? I mean, there the boundaries of the time of the session, the boundaries about contact in between, boundaries about touch, things that a parent would have given the patient, but that's not safe or appropriate because you are still two adults healing old wounds.
I like what you said in that other episode, that one reason to even avoid this terminology, well, partly because it's not true, but also it might reinforce the fantasy that the patient has, that somehow it's going to take away all of those experiences that were negative, that they can be wiped clean.
Right.
But because you're saying, the therapist can't be all of those things to you. And so there's still something to grieve there.
And I honestly, that's going to sound kind of, I don't know, jerky in some way, but I think the grief is part of it. I think a big part of moving on is grieving what you didn't get from your parent. And then maybe that's jumping ahead, but at the end of a therapy like that, part of the termination or the ending process is also grieving what you didn't get from the therapist. So in that way, I think there's some parallels, but also just some really key differences.
Yeah. That everybody lets you down.
Right, that everybody lets you down,
Right.
And yet it's still worth trying because there are good things out there and maybe
Right.
better things and better opportunities.
Well, that's
right?
what I mean. So we let each other down. Even at our best, we let each other down. And that is an important lesson, I think, to learn, to internalize.
It is. And that it doesn't mean that the person didn't love you. I know we are doing a lot of quotes, but I do have a Freud one where he would also say that the goal of therapy is turning neurotic misery into ordinary human unhappiness. Right?
Yeah.
Right. That there's still going to be problems in life. It's not going to be great all the time, but that you are an ordinary person with a full range of emotions. Maybe you can cry at a funeral, and then maybe you also can feel a lot of joy when you're out doing something playful with the people you care about, as imperfect as everyone may be.
Yeah. Hey, I don't know if there's anything more to say with that last question, the not pretending to be someone you're not.
I'm not sure. I didn't know if she was talking about just being an emotional person, being a sensitive person, being a person that is affected by things and is allowed to say that, if that's
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of
Like own your.
who her true self is. Like own your tendencies, own yourself. Yeah, and own it as, something that's good or something that can be used, something you can make a choice around.
Well, what if she finds out she's actually not hypersensitive? That was just her family's interpretation because she was so unlike them or because they were so closed off. Do you know what I mean?
Then
Like
she
maybe,
can, yeah, totally. Then
yeah,
she can
her
go out
authentic
and
self may not be. May just simply be perfectly.
may not be
normal.
pathological at all.
Right. Yeah, that would be great to
Not
find
that
out.
hypersensitivity is pathological, but she may be, yeah, you're right, just much more middle of the road than she thought.
All right, a big thanks to Becca, Jessica, and Shauna for taking the time to send in your questions, and we thank all of you for listening. Please send in your questions by email or an audio message at our website, callthepsychiatrist.com. We'd love to see you on Instagram and Facebook at Call the Psychiatrist. And if you've gotten any benefit from the show, we'd really, really appreciate it if you'd write a review wherever you listen to the show. Take care.
Bye. We are a real obnoxious family of know-it-alls. And no matter how many times we try to admit when we're wrong, the overriding know-it-allness may just be intractable.